Hi, I want to give you some elaboration and correct answers for the worksheets that were posted online. And if you don't have this worksheet, you might want to get it in front of you. The first sheet might have baffled you, and all it is an opportunity for you to go through, write a definition here so that it will help you to remember. You're going to need these terms on the final exam, and these are the kinds of terms you should be using in the upcoming critical analysis. And again, there are a few minor changes you might want to make. In your book, I told you with appeal to the masses. That's also called bandwagon. And then further down, begging the question, circular reasoning is fine if you want to use that because begging the question is peculiar. It is a subtype, but for our purposes, they are really synonymous, and that's the way I'll handle that with you. Further down, you have, again, false cause post hoc, or mistaking correlation for causation. All three of those are essentially the same thing. So feel free to fill this in. It can only help you. It'll give you a quick sheet when you're looking for, okay, what kinds of logical fallacies are they for the test, and what are some possible things I can write about in discussing logic in the critical analysis. Now for some answers. We have the first one. That is a complex question. Number one is a complex question. Number two is post hoc or mistaking correlation for causation. Number three is a straw man argument. And number four is a hasty generalization. You can't judge Stephen King's work by reading one of his books. He has a diverse literary output, and some of his books are garbage, and there's a number of them are probably classics that will be considered masterpieces of literature of our era, and if we're still around after a few more pandemics, a few hundred years from now, we might still be reading some of his stuff, but some of it's best forgotten, even the movies made from them. Number five is an either-or fallacy. It could also be considered, because there's more than one option. We don't have to have the drinking age at 21 or 18. We could do what used to be done and have kind of a hybrid where at 18 you could drink beer and wine, but the hard stuff you can't get till you're 21. There's more than one option, and an either-or fallacy reduces us simplistically to merely two. And the rest of it's also a slippery slope. I don't think that's going to cause the land to be rife with immortality or immorality, not immortality, and lawlessness. Number six is circular reasoning, or you could call it begging the question too. Just goes in a circle. He's the authority. How do you know he's authority? He told me he's authority. Why would you listen to him? Because he's the ultimate authority. Just goes in a big circle. Number seven is a false authority. This is a plague on our humanity. This kind of thing happens frequently where we listen to what famous people have to say, and many times they don't have an area of expertise that is addressing the particular issue, and this is a pretty blatant example. Number eight is a slippery slope argument. The slippery slope, we're going to start at one place, and it's like going down a hill that's just slick. I don't know if you've ever had that happen to you. I've had that happen a few times where I'm at the top and suddenly I slip and I'm down at the bottom where I didn't want to be. It's that sort of picture with slippery slope. You start here and wind up where you don't want to be. Number nine is very common, naturalistic fallacy. Just because it's good doesn't mean, or natural doesn't mean it's good. You can, poison ivy isn't good for you. You smoke that, it'll kill you. Echinacea, it's natural, but just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good or healthy or better. Number 10 is an ad hominem. We're calling this fellow a racist rather than listening to what he has to say. 11 is a false analogy. We're comparing just any cute blonde to two women who at least have a modicum of talent and saying, okay, they're the same. You give me a cute blonde, I can turn them into big stars like them. It's a false comparison. 12 is an appeal to the masses, or bandwagon, if you want to call it that. And number 13 is a burden of proof. It's a burden of proof. If I'm going to say that that burden of proof is, or that intelligent design is true, it's up to me to prove it, not to have you come and either prove it or disprove it. The burden of proof is on me, the person making the claim. Number 14 is definitely, you could call it mistaking correlation for causation, false cause, or post hoc, if you want to call it that. I think you can see that they were just existing in parallel. The idea of ice cream and water ice in July, that's not one's not causing the other. Number 15 is not an argument really at all. It's just an appeal to force. And number 16 is a red herring. That's actually from history. And this is a pretty good example. In the Iraq War, that was part of a larger war on terrorism. And we wound up invading there, even though there wasn't a terroristic threat, because of suspected nuclear weapons development. That wasn't a terroristic threat. I'm not saying that might not be a reason to invade, but if a reason to invade was that we're trying to root out terrorist cells, the idea that they had weapons of mass destruction is not relevant to that particular argument of going in looking for terrorists. So if we want to go in for the reason they have weapons of mass destruction, then that needs to be the claim that we're making, not that there's terrorists there. So that's what was going on behind that. Number 1 is hasty generalization. We want more data than that, and frankly, it might be more than hasty generalization, but we won't develop that. So definitely hasty generalization. 2 is an appeal to the masses. It's best because so many people use it. It doesn't mean it's best, it just means it's popular. Don't confuse the two. 3 is circular reasoning or begging the question. Number 4 is a complex question. Number 5 is arguing from ignorance. Again, there's no evidence that isn't what happened. And by the way, burden of proof and arguing from ignorance are similar. But this is arguing from ignorance because I'm saying that there's not proof out there that it didn't happen. The wording of it's very subtle, but a little different from the other one. In one, there's basically, you're saying there's no evidence, and therefore it must be true, and that's never good. And the other, you're really demanding that your audience come up with the answers. And if you are the one making a claim, it's up to you. Number 6 is a definite post hoc fallacy or mistaking correlation with causation. Number 7 is an either-or fallacy. There are other options. Number 8 would be ad hominem. We're just attacking the kinds of people who do animal experimentation without looking at possible reasons why they do it and why it might be, a good thing, so to speak. Number 9 is a slippery slope, and number 10 is definitely a red herring. This is irrelevant information to not texting while driving. You could also construe it as being an ad hominem because the person being alluded to here were attacking rather than listening to their good sense about not texting and driving. Excuse me. Number 1 is a red herring. His lewdness has nothing to do with his budget sense. It could also be construed, I suppose, as a form of ad hominem. We're attacking him and the things he did rather than looking at his arguments. So there's really a couple things there. Number 2 with the marijuana, that is a slippery slope. Number 3 is another complex question. Number 4 is guilt by association, and this is a good one. You support welfare. Soviet Russia has a welfare system. Soviet Russia was bad, therefore welfare. That's not good logic. Similar ideas have come up often where I remember a gun control or an anti-gun control bumper sticker that stated, you support gun control, so did Adolf Hitler. Well, that's guilt by association. We're attaching the idea of gun control to somebody we all don't like. Therefore, gun control is bad because this person was bad. And Hitler did have gun control. Most tyrants and dictators like to control who has the guns. It's just saying. Number 5. Do you know Bigfoot is real? He definitely exists. Or do you have any proof that isn't real? That is arguing from ignorance. And I would also, because of the way it's worded, it's directed directly to an audience. You could put burden of proof as well. Number 6 is a good example of moving the goalpost. It's the idea that, okay, you have reached the goal here. You should have scored. And I said, no, that's not really the goal. The goal is now further down. And you reach that goal. And I said, no, that's not really. It's actually this one. And you can't do that in a football game. You can't do that in a soccer game. But people do that in arguing. And what's happened here is you're asking for evidence, and I'm giving you it. I gave it to you here, and I'm giving you here. And now you're asking for something that can't exist by definition. So that's moving the goalpost or standard for accepting an argument. Is the way you could look at it. 7, this happens very frequently. I know your argument's wrong. How could a liberal give a good argument? That's ad hominem. We are attacking that person, not looking at what they have to say or maybe the good sense behind their argument. It'd be nice if Republicans and Democrats both would listen to what the other side is saying. Both sides have some pretty good ideas if they listen to one another. That might include you. Number 8 is an appeal to force. And number 9 is a case of circular reasoning, where it's just going around in a circle there. And I didn't mention it, but I'm kind of hoping you didn't do that. I'm kind of thinking you didn't. If I was a class and I would have just announced, I'd say don't do that. I've never had people do that. I just in class have always had many extras. And anyway, that's the deal. I hope that gave you some insight into these terms, these concepts that you'll need to be using as you go forward and write the critical analysis. And hopefully you can recognize these sorts of ideas on the final exam. More about that later, of course. Catch you later on. Be safe, be good, stay out of trouble. Bye.